The hum of the plane's engines droned on, but Jada's heart raced. She clutched her purse tighter as the flight attendant's polite smile didn't reach her eyes. She had boarded the wrong jet. The opulent, polished wood, the golden accents, it was nothing like the cramped economy she was used to. But when a tall, mysterious man in a custom suit approached her with a grin, whispering, "Welcome aboard," Jada's world tilted sideways. She wasn't just on the wrong jet. She was about to be swept into a world she never thought she'd enter, with a man she couldn't have possibly imagined. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you want to miss it. Jada Thompson had always been the type of woman to focus on others. As a nurse at one of the busiest hospitals in Miami, she was used to selflessness. Every day, she navigated through the chaos, healing wounds, easing pain, and putting her own needs on the back burner. The long shifts and emotional tolls had left her exhausted, but she wore her fatigue like a badge of honor. Yet today, she found herself in a different kind of exhaustion. She had taken the wrong jet. Her flight to the Caribbean had been delayed, and in her tired, overworked state, she mistakenly boarded a private jet meant for someone else. She didn't even realize the mix-up until she was already halfway down the aisle, realizing there was no coach section, no overhead bins, and no familiar faces. The lavish interior was starkly different from what she expected, with leather seats, marble counters, and crystal chandeliers hanging above. The only other person on board, a tall man in a dark tailored suit, was sitting near the window, focused on his tablet. He hadn't seemed to notice her at first, but now, as she hesitated by the doorway, his piercing gaze lifted, locking onto hers. There was no mistake, she was in the wrong place, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. The mystery of it all, the comfort of the seat, the warmth of the Caribbean breeze drifting in from the open door. She was tired, so tired, and maybe, just maybe, she could stay a little longer. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, Elias Sinclair was used to control. A billionaire by every standard, he was the founder of one of the most prestigious tech firms in the world. His days were filled with board meetings, multi-million-dollar deals, and the constant hum of success. However, that same success left him disconnected, surrounded by people who admired his wealth but feared his sharp mind. His relationships were transactional, his life meticulously ordered. But as he glanced up from his tablet and saw the woman standing in the aisle, his world shifted. Jada was nothing like the usual crowd that circled him. She was out of place, and yet, something about her, the quiet strength, the weariness in her eyes, felt familiar. He stood up, offering her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but felt genuine. He could see the confusion in her posture, her nervous glance. "Miss, you seem a bit lost," he said, his voice smooth, rich with the kind of power that made people listen. "Can I help you find your seat?" Jada didn't know what to say. She was still trying to process how she ended up here, in a world so different from her own. "I'm not sure this is my flight," she trailed off, a mix of embarrassment and frustration tightening in her chest. She wanted to escape, to leave before things got any more complicated. Elias, sensing her discomfort, smiled warmly. "Don't worry about it. You're on my jet now. Let's make sure you're comfortable. I've got plenty of room, and it's a long flight. Would you like something to drink?" For a moment, Jada just stood there, weighing her options. She could turn around, admit the mistake, and take the next commercial flight. But something kept her rooted to the spot: curiosity, maybe, or just the exhaustion of endless work, leaving her with a rare moment of indulgence. "I suppose a drink wouldn't hurt," she replied hesitantly. "What would you do if you found yourself on the wrong flight, surrounded by luxury? Would you leave or stay and find out what happens next? Share your thoughts in the comments." Jada sank into the plush chair, the soft leather cool against her skin. The jet's interior was like something out of a dream: silk-lined seats, soft lighting, and walls adorned with artwork that hinted at vast wealth. She glanced around, still unsure whether she was making the right choice by staying. The confusion of accidentally boarding the wrong jet hadn't faded, but she felt too tired to deal with the hassle of leaving now. Elias had excused himself to the cockpit, leaving her alone in the quiet luxury of the plane. The gentle hum of the engines and the rhythmic sound of the wings cutting through the air was oddly soothing. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the comfort of the space take over her. When Elias returned, he carried 2 crystal glasses of champagne, the golden liquid catching the light. He handed her one, his fingers brushing hers briefly, sending an unexpected spark of warmth through her. She looked up at him, startled by the intensity of the moment. "I thought you might need this after the chaos of the airport," he said, a knowing smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you," Jada said softly, lifting the glass to her lips. The champagne was crisp, refreshing. It felt like a small moment of luxury she wasn't sure she deserved. As she took another sip, Elias leaned against the seat opposite her. There was an air of ease about him, but there was also something distant, something that suggested he was just as tired as she was. The way he carried himself so composed and detached gave off the impression that he was always in control, but Jada had an inkling that wasn't entirely true. She studied him more closely, noticing the faint tension in his jaw, the sharp lines of his suit, the deliberate calmness in his eyes that seemed to hide something deeper. "You don't have to stay, you know," he said suddenly, breaking the silence between them. His voice was low, almost casual, but there was an undercurrent of something else. "I'm not going to force you to stay if you really want to get off." Jada blinked, startled by the unexpected offer. Why would he even care? "Why are you being so nice?" she asked before she could stop herself. The words tumbled out, and she immediately regretted it. She wasn't the kind of person who asked questions like that, especially not to a man like him. He chuckled, leaning back into the seat. "I've learned that the unexpected can sometimes be the most rewarding," Elias said cryptically. There was something in his tone, something that made her want to ask more. "And besides, I'm curious. Why would a woman like you be on the wrong jet?" Jada's stomach twisted. There it was, the question she had been avoiding. She opened her mouth to respond, but her words faltered. She could easily lie, make up some excuse. But something about Elias's gaze, patient, probing, felt like it would strip her bare if she wasn't honest. "I was just tired," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a nurse. I work long hours, and sometimes, I make mistakes, big ones." His eyes softened, as though he understood far more than he let on. "Mistakes don't define us. How we handle them does." The sincerity in his voice sent a ripple of warmth through Jada, and she nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what to make of the strange connection they were already building. There was something magnetic about Elias, something that pulled at her, made her feel seen in a way that few ever had. The conversation drifted after that, and they fell into an easy, unspoken rhythm. Jada found herself laughing at Elias's dry humor, and he, in turn, seemed to relax in her presence. The jet's luxury faded into the background as they shared stories of their lives, her challenges in the ER, his battles with running a billion-dollar empire. They were worlds apart, but for the first time in a long while, Jada felt as if she was being understood by someone. The plane cruised over the ocean as the Caribbean lights began to twinkle below them. The soft lull of the engines and the rhythmic beat of the jet's wings seemed to lull them both into a quiet, reflective state. It was then that Elias looked at her with an intensity that made Jada's heart skip a beat. "Jada," he said softly, his voice low, filled with something more than mere curiosity. "What would you do if you weren't a nurse? If you didn't have to work, if you could just dream for once?" The question hung between them like a heavy fog. Jada didn't answer immediately. She had never allowed herself to dream outside of her role as a caretaker, as the woman who held everything together. There was no space for fantasies or possibilities. But with Elias's gaze fixed on her, she felt the boundaries of her own world begin to shift. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I don't think I know how to dream anymore." Elias studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, as if trying to read into the layers she kept hidden. "Maybe it's time you started," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper. In that instant, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet promise. Neither of them could have predicted how much that moment would change everything. Do you believe that sometimes, the right people come into our lives at the right time? What would you do if you had a chance to escape your reality for a while? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. As the plane descended toward the Caribbean, the shimmering lights of a private resort below flickered like stars in the distance. Jada felt a knot in her stomach. She had been swept up in the whirlwind of Elias's world, but now, as reality began to set in, a wave of uncertainty crashed over her. Was this really happening? Was she truly about to step into a life so far removed from her own? Elias had been nothing but kind, offering her a glimpse into his luxurious, exclusive world, but Jada couldn't ignore the uncomfortable truth: she didn't belong here. She was a nurse, a woman who spent her days mopping floors, checking vitals, and caring for people in need. She didn't belong in a world of private jets, champagne toasts, and glossy smiles. It was all too easy to get lost in the fantasy. But once the jet landed, she would be forced to confront what she had done. She had chosen to stay on the wrong flight, to escape into someone else's life. When the plane finally touched down, Elias rose from his seat and moved toward the door, his posture exuding confidence. He turned back toward Jada, who was still sitting frozen in her seat, staring out the window, her mind racing. "I'll give you a moment to collect yourself," he said, his tone casual, but there was a subtle note of concern in his voice. "Take your time. We're not in any rush." Jada nodded, forcing a smile as she tried to pull herself together. She couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding her. Everything in this place was so far removed from the hospital, the struggles, and the life she had built. She had come here seeking a moment of reprieve, a tiny escape from the weight of her responsibilities. But now that she was face to face with this luxury, she felt herself retreating into the familiar comfort of work, the predictable, the known. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. She felt a pang of panic. Was she really going to let this moment slip away? Was she going to run back to her old life because it was easier? Because it was safer? It was the kind of thinking that had kept her stuck in the same loop for years, never daring to truly break free. She had always been afraid of the unknown, of stepping into something that might change everything. But deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was the chance she had been waiting for. But even as she considered it, the walls of her mind closed in. She had nothing in common with Elias, nothing to offer him beyond the fleeting interest of a wrong passenger. He was the billionaire CEO, she was just a nurse. The gulf between them was so vast, it felt like there was no way to bridge it. When she stood up from her seat, the decision to leave felt almost inevitable. She stepped off the jet, her feet landing softly on the plush tarmac. The warm Caribbean air hit her face like a bomb, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Elias had already moved to the awaiting car, but Jada hesitated, looking around at the opulent surroundings. The private resort stretched out before her, with sparkling pools, white sand beaches, and towering palm trees. The beauty of it all made her feel like she was walking in a dream. But this wasn't her dream. "I think I need to go," she called out, her voice steady but distant. Elias, who had been casually leaning against the car, turned toward her. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that made Jada pause. He said nothing at first, just watching her with that intense, steady gaze. "You're leaving?" His voice was soft, but the undercurrent of disbelief was palpable. Jada took a deep breath, fighting the emotions that welled up inside her. "I can't stay here. This isn't. I don't belong in this world." Her words felt more like a confession than an explanation. She looked down, avoiding his gaze, suddenly ashamed of the way she had let herself get caught up in the luxury, in the ease of it all. There was a long, tense silence between them before Elias straightened up, his demeanor shifting slightly. "I understand," he said, though his voice held a note of sadness she hadn't expected. "But if you run now, you'll never know what could have happened. You'll always wonder." His words struck Jada like a punch to the gut. She wanted to respond, to push back, to tell him that she knew who she was, that she had her life and her purpose. But deep down, she knew that he was right. She had been running her whole life, running from failure, from mistakes, from change. She had built walls so high that no one could reach her, but now, standing on the edge of something so different, she realized how much she had closed herself off. The sudden vulnerability was overwhelming, and she could feel the walls she had spent years constructing beginning to crumble. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong in a place, even though it was everything you wanted? What did you do in that moment? Let us know in the comments below. The day drifted by slowly, like the gentle waves lapping against the shore outside. Elias and Jada spent hours talking, exploring the property, and sharing stories about their lives. It was strange for once, Jada wasn't trying to fix anything or anyone. She wasn't playing the role of the caretaker, the steady nurse who always had her guard up. Instead, she was just being. And somehow, with Elias by her side, it felt natural. After a long walk along the beach, Elias suggested they sit by the water, the cool surf brushing their feet as they sank into the soft sand. The conversation had turned light again, playful even. Jada laughed at something Elias said about his awkward teenage years, about how he had once tried and failed miserably at surfing in California. "You tried surfing?" Jada asked, incredulous. "You? The billionaire with no time for foolish things?" Elias smiled sheepishly, his usual confidence now replaced with a rare vulnerability. "I thought I could pull it off," he said, shaking his head. "Turns out, I'm not exactly cut out for the ocean. But I like to try new things, even if I fail spectacularly." The self-deprecation in his voice made Jada laugh harder. It was a sound that felt like freedom, like a weight lifting off her chest. She hadn't realized how much she'd been holding herself back until now. She had never allowed herself to be so open, to laugh at herself, to enjoy a moment just for the sake of it. "I guess it's not about being good at everything," Jada said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's about trying, about stepping outside of your comfort zone." Elias nodded, his gaze lingering on her, his expression softening. "Exactly. And sometimes you need someone else to help you get there. To remind you that it's okay to let go of the past. To see what's possible if you just trust a little." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, comfortable. Jada could feel the warmth of his presence beside her, and it wasn't just about the luxury, or the villa, or the beautiful scenery. It was something deeper, something that she hadn't expected to find in this place. Elias wasn't just a billionaire who had everything, he was a man who had struggled, who had felt the weight of his own expectations, and yet, he had somehow managed to open up to her in a way that felt rare and real. Jada felt herself opening up too. The cracks she had been so desperately trying to protect had begun to widen, and before she knew it, she found herself sharing parts of her life that she had kept hidden for so long. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, her voice soft as she looked out at the horizon, her gaze distant. "I've spent so much of my life putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own. I never really let myself think about what I need, what I want." Elias turned his body slightly toward her, his eyes fixed on hers. "What do you want, Jada?" he asked, his voice steady, sincere. The question hung in the air, and for a long moment, Jada was silent, processing the depth of his words. It wasn't a question she had asked herself in years. What did she want? Beyond taking care of her patients, beyond being the strong one for her brother, beyond all the sacrifices she had made, what did she truly want? "I want," she trailed off, the words heavy with meaning, as if they were floating just out of reach. "I want to feel free. I want to stop being afraid of everything, of failing, of opening myself up to others, of trusting people. I want to let go, to stop pretending that I have it all together." Her voice wavered at the end, the emotion creeping into her words in a way she hadn't expected. Elias didn't say anything at first. He just sat beside her, his presence steady and unwavering, as if giving her the space to let the truth come to the surface. After a moment, he spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. "You don't have to have it all together. You're allowed to break. We all are. But that's how we grow, Jada. That's how we heal." Jada's breath caught in her throat at his words. It was as if he had spoken directly to the fears she had been carrying for so long. She had always been the one who held it all together, but Elias's words cut through her defenses, making her realize that she didn't have to keep pretending anymore. She could let go. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe it was okay to be vulnerable, to admit that she didn't have all the answers. Elias turned his gaze toward the ocean, his face thoughtful. After a long pause, he finally spoke again, his voice low and contemplative. "I've been running from my own fears too. I spent so much time trying to build an empire that I lost sight of the people I was building it for. My family, my friends, even myself. And when it all came crashing down, I realized that I had to face it all. I had to face the loneliness, the pressure. I had to stop pretending I had everything under control." Jada listened intently, the vulnerability in his voice drawing her in. It was the first time she had heard him speak so openly about his own struggles. "Sometimes it's easier to hide behind success," he continued, "to bury your fears in work and achievement. But when you do that, you forget what really matters. You forget how to connect with people, how to be real." Jada nodded slowly, feeling a connection between them that ran deeper than she had expected. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone in her struggles. They were both in this together, both trying to overcome their own fears, their own barriers. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jada felt something shift inside her. The weight she had been carrying, the fear of being vulnerable, seemed just a little bit lighter. She wasn't sure what the future held, or if she was ready to embrace everything Elias was offering. But in this moment, she knew that for the first time in years, she wasn't running from herself. Have you ever felt like you were running from something, a fear, a part of yourself that you didn't want to face? What would it take for you to finally stop running? Let us know in the comments. The days that followed felt like a dream, one that Jada wasn't sure she was ready to wake up from. With each passing moment, she felt the walls she had so carefully built around herself crumbling, piece by piece. Elias had a way of drawing her out of herself, of showing her sides of her own heart that she had long since buried. There was a quiet beauty in the way he understood her, in the way he never tried to rush her, but simply was there, a constant presence, offering support without asking for anything in return. They spent more time together, sharing meals, long walks along the beach, and even moments of silence where they just existed in the same space. Jada had started to let herself feel. Not just the joy of being here, but the fullness of what it meant to be seen and understood. But as the days passed, something shifted, something small but significant, and Jada began to feel the tension rising between them. It wasn't something she could explain, but it was there, hanging in the air like an invisible thread waiting to snap. One evening, after dinner, Elias suggested they go for a swim in the villa's private pool. The water glowed under the moonlight, casting a soft, silvery light across the garden. The air was warm, but there was a gentle breeze that carried the scent of saltwater, and Jada, for the first time in what felt like forever, felt truly free. They talked as they swam, the conversation light, almost playful, but there was an underlying current of something else, something unspoken. Elias seemed different tonight, quieter, more distant. He had always been a man of mystery, but now it felt like he was retreating into himself, pulling away just when Jada had finally allowed herself to open up. The change was subtle at first. Elias was still there, still present, but there was a tension in his body, a guardedness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Jada couldn't ignore it. She could feel it in the way he avoided her gaze, in the way his words seemed more measured, less personal. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't want to push him. She had learned to respect his space, just as he had respected hers. But the growing distance between them felt like a chasm that neither of them was willing to cross. It was late, and the moon was high in the sky when Elias finally broke the silence. "Jada, I need to be honest with you," he said, his voice low, his tone heavy with something she couldn't quite place. He stood at the edge of the pool, his back to her, as if he was gathering his thoughts before speaking. "There's something I've been avoiding, and I can't keep pretending like it doesn't matter." Jada's heart skipped a beat, the air between them suddenly thick with tension. She moved closer, her breath shallow, a mixture of fear and curiosity rising inside her. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias turned toward her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I've been trying to make this easier. I've been trying to convince myself that this whatever this is between us isn't complicated. But I can't anymore." His voice was strained, almost regretful. "Jada, I've been keeping something from you. Something important." Jada's stomach churned. She could feel the weight of his words before he even said them, and she suddenly realized that all the openness, all the connection they had built over the past few days, might not have been enough to bridge the divide that lay between them. "I don't know how to explain it," Elias continued, running a hand through his damp hair, "but my life, the way I live, the people I'm surrounded by, it's not what you think. I've built this world for myself, but it's filled with things that might not align with who you are. You deserve someone who can give you more than what I can offer. I can't keep pretending that I don't have obligations, people who depend on me for things I can't just walk away from." Jada's mind was racing. She was trying to process the words he was saying, trying to make sense of the growing ache in her chest. "What are you saying, Elias?" He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I'm saying that I can't give you the life you deserve. Not with the way I'm living it. And as much as I care about you, I can't let myself drag you into something you don't want. You're not meant for this world, Jada. You're meant for something better." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a dismissal. A belief that she was somehow unworthy of the life he had to offer. And the worst part was, she could hear the truth in his words. Elias was right in some ways. His world, the world of billionaires, the expectations, the responsibilities, was never meant for someone like her. She had never been a part of that world, never wanted to be. But what hurt the most was the quiet finality in his voice. The sense that he had already made up his mind. Jada stepped back, her heart racing, the cold water swirling around her as if it were pulling her down. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. "You don't get to decide what I deserve, Elias," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and pain. "You don't get to decide that for me. I'm not some charity case that you can just cast aside when things get too complicated." Elias flinched, but he didn't argue. He just stood there, watching her, his face a mixture of regret and resignation. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly. "But we were never meant to last. You've got your life, your purpose. And I've got mine. I won't drag you into something that will break you." Jada shook her head, tears pricking the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't let him see her like this, vulnerable, exposed. "I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else needed me to be," she whispered. "But for once, I thought I could just be with you." There was a long pause before Elias finally spoke, his voice barely audible over the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. "I don't want to hurt you, Jada. I don't know how to do this." She didn't know how to answer. There was no easy way to untangle the mess of emotion swirling between them. The connection they had felt so real, so raw, but now it seemed to be slipping through her fingers like sand. Jada turned away, her chest tight, her heart broken. She didn't know what was left for them now. Have you ever been in a relationship where one person seemed to pull away, even though you were both invested? What did you do in that moment? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The days that followed were a blur of silence. Jada kept to herself in the villa, retreating into the solitude of her thoughts. The beach was still as beautiful as it had been when they first arrived, the ocean still the same crystal blue, the sky stretching endlessly above her. But nothing felt the same anymore. The warmth of the sun, the beauty of the surroundings, it all felt distant, like a dream that had slipped beyond her reach. She hadn't seen Elias much since that night by the pool. He had become a shadow, lingering around the edges of her world but never quite stepping back into it. And Jada, for the first time in her life, felt completely alone in a way she never had before. The emotional space between them was vast, and no matter how many times she tried to push past it, it only seemed to grow larger. Elias had been clear, hadn't he? He had made his choice, told her what he believed was best for both of them. He didn't want to hurt her, but in doing so, he had pulled away just when she needed him most. But what if there was more? What if, just maybe, they could find a way to make it work? The thought plagued her, gnawing at the edges of her mind, refusing to let go. Her heart told her one thing, while her mind screamed the opposite. She had lived her life following her responsibilities, her need to fix, to care, to help. But for once, she had to ask herself, was it time to make a choice for herself? The choice wasn't just about Elias. It was about her, about stepping out of the role she had always played. It was about confronting her own fear of failure, her fear of trusting, and, most of all, her fear of wanting something for herself. Elias had been distant since that night, but today, something was different. She found him standing at the edge of the garden, gazing out at the ocean as if lost in thought. His posture was tense, as though he were carrying some heavy burden, but there was something in his eyes, something that made her stop in her tracks. "I'm sorry, Jada," he said before she could even speak, his voice soft but full of regret. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I know I've been distant. I didn't want to put you in a position where you'd have to choose. I thought it would be easier if I made the choice for you." Jada felt her heart ache at his words. Easier for her? Had he truly believed that? Had he really thought that she would just walk away without a fight? "I've spent so much time trying to protect myself," Elias continued, turning to face her, his eyes meeting hers. "Trying to protect you, too. But I can't keep running from what's right in front of me. What's right in front of us." Jada felt her breath catch in her throat. Was this the moment she had been waiting for? The moment when he would finally reach out, when the walls would come down, and they would find their way back to each other? "I've been afraid," Elias admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "Afraid that if I let you in, if I let myself care, it would all fall apart. But that's no way to live, Jada. It's not the way I want to live anymore." The rawness in his voice, the vulnerability he was offering, was like a spark that ignited something deep inside her. It was everything she had wanted to hear, everything she had feared hearing, because now, the choice wasn't just his. It was hers, too. Her heart raced, her thoughts a whirlwind. Could she trust him again? Could she trust herself to take this leap into the unknown, to let go of her fears and embrace the possibility of something more? Elias stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm asking you to make a choice, Jada. Not just for me, but for you. Do you want to take a chance on us? Do you want to let go of what you think you need and open yourself up to something that could be real?" Jada swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She had spent so long holding on to what was familiar, so long keeping everyone at arm's length. But now, standing here in front of Elias, she realized that the only way to truly live, to truly be free, was to trust again. She had built walls around her heart for years, but in doing so, she had never allowed herself to feel the fullness of life. She had avoided the very thing that could make her truly alive: love, vulnerability, connection. And now, Elias was offering her the chance to open herself to all of that. To take the risk of loving someone, of letting herself be loved. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of making the wrong choice, of getting hurt again. But I can't keep living in fear, Elias. I can't keep running away from what could be. I want to take the chance. I want to see where this goes." Elias reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. His touch was warm, reassuring, and for the first time in days, Jada felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. "I'll be here, Jada," he said, his voice steady. "I'll be here, no matter what. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just take my hand, and we'll figure it out together." And in that moment, as their fingers intertwined, Jada realized that the choice wasn't just about trusting Elias, it was about trusting herself. Trusting that she could be vulnerable, trusting that she could let go of her past, and embracing the uncertainty of the future. For the first time in her life, Jada felt free. The days after Jada made her choice passed in a blur of new beginnings. It was as if the moment they both took that leap, when their hands touched and their hearts opened to each other, had set everything into motion. The walls Jada had so carefully constructed for years were slowly crumbling, but this time, it didn't feel like she was losing control. It felt like she was gaining something far more precious, a chance to experience the world with someone by her side, to finally live for herself, without the weight of others' expectations. Elias wasn't just a billionaire, he wasn't just the man who had once seemed so distant and unreachable. He was the person who stood beside her, who listened to her when she spoke, who made her laugh when she thought she could never smile again. And in return, Jada found herself offering him something she hadn't given anyone in a long time: her true self, without the masks, without the fear. They spent their days exploring the island, walking along the beaches, sharing stories about their pasts, and learning about each other in ways neither had expected. Elias showed Jada parts of himself that few people had ever seen: the quiet moments of vulnerability, the uncertainty about his future, the pressure he still felt to prove himself. And Jada, in turn, shared her fears, her desires, and her dreams of a life where she could help people not just through medicine, but through love, kindness, and connection. But their journey wasn't just about the glamour of private jets and luxurious villas. It was about rediscovering the raw, messy parts of themselves that had been buried for too long. They both learned that perfection wasn't what made a life worth living. It was the willingness to embrace the imperfections, to open your heart even when you were afraid it might break. And so, over the next few weeks, something beautiful began to unfold between them. The tension that had once marked their relationship began to dissipate. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every touch became a promise that they weren't just temporary, that this wasn't just a fleeting escape from reality. This was real. This was something worth fighting for. It was on a quiet evening, with the sun setting behind the horizon in brilliant shades of orange and purple, that Elias took Jada's hand as they stood by the edge of the beach. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft yet filled with intent, "about how far we've come in such a short time. About what I've learned from you, about what you've taught me." Jada looked at him, her heart swelling with the warmth of his words. It had been so long since someone had looked at her the way Elias was looking at her now, like she mattered, like she was enough. "What have I taught you?" she asked, her voice teasing yet filled with curiosity. Elias smiled, his eyes softening with affection. "You've taught me to stop running. To stop being afraid of what might happen if I let go. You've taught me that love isn't something you can control, but something you can choose. And I've chosen you, Jada. I've chosen this." Jada's breath caught in her throat, her heart fluttering in her chest. She could feel the truth in his words, the sincerity, the vulnerability. Elias had always been someone who fought for control, for perfection, but now he was standing before her, acknowledging that the most beautiful things in life couldn't be controlled. They could only be lived. "I've chosen you, too," Jada whispered, her voice barely audible, yet her words were the most real thing she had ever said. "And I want to keep choosing this. I want to choose us." There was a quiet moment between them, the world around them slowing as they stood in the golden light of the setting sun, two people who had once felt lost in their own worlds, now finding something new together. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, delicate box. Jada's eyes widened in surprise as he opened it to reveal a simple, yet elegant silver bracelet. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but the sincerity of the gesture took her breath away. "I don't have all the answers," Elias said, his voice steady and filled with emotion, "but I know I want you in my life. In whatever way that means. And I know that this," he gestured to the bracelet, "is just a small token of how much you mean to me. A promise that I'm here, Jada. And I'll keep choosing you, no matter what." Tears welled up in Jada's eyes as she took the bracelet from the box, the weight of his words settling in her heart. She had never imagined that love could feel this real, this raw, this unconditional. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So do check it out.